This is the Economic Club of Florida, a distinguished platform for discussion of the major national issues of the day. On today's program, Armando Pimentel, President and CEO of Florida Power and Light Company, on why solar power is now cheaper than natural gas over the long run.
We have 66 solar projects today all across the state. By early next year, we'll have over 100 solar projects in operation. We're building them because they save money for our customers.
Good day and welcome to the 573rd in our series of distinguished speaker programs. I'm Harvey Bennett for the Economic Club of Florida. Florida is known as the Sunshine State for a reason. We have one of the highest number of days annually where the sun is shining in the sky. But for many, many years, we've been frustrated at not being able to take advantage of that ever-bright light for the photovoltaic source of energy we've always known it could be, and now is. Our featured speaker today has some stunning news along that front. He is Armando Pimentel, President and CEO of Florida Power and Light Company. FPL is the largest utility in the state, and nation for that matter, and its parent company, NextEra Energy, is the largest investor-owned electric producer in America. Now, here's Club Chair Lo Bilby, shareholder with the Greenberg Traurig Law Firm, with our formal introduction.
It is my pleasure, as Chair of the Economic Club of Florida, to introduce and to welcome Armando Pimentel, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Florida Power and Light, FPL. As you know, FPL is a subsidiary of NextEra Energy, Inc., and the largest investor-owned electric utility in the nation. Mr. Pimentel was appointed as President and CEO of FPL this past February 2023. He's a relative newbie. Prior to his appointment, though, as President and CEO of Florida Power and Light, Mr. Pimentel served as President and CEO of NextEra Energy Resources, a competitive clean energy supplier and the world's largest generator of renewable energy from the wind and from the sun. And, as you may know, is a world leader in battery storage, what the world needs right now. Of equal interest is that NextEra Energy Resources operates 3 nuclear power plants in 2 states, and its parent company, NextEra Energy, operates one of the largest nuclear power fleets in the United States. Mr. Pimentel was previously, as he served as Executive Vice President Finance and Chief Financial Officer of NextEra Energy. Before joining NextEra Energy, Mr. Pimentel was a partner at Deloitte & Touche, LLP, and he held various client and leadership positions in the financial services and energy industries. He also led Deloitte's Power and Utilities business segment. His career reads power. From 1996 to 1998, Mr. Pimentel worked in the office of the Chief Accountant of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission as a professional accounting fellow, and he holds a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting from Florida State University. Please welcome Armando Pimentel.
Thank you. I always love getting folks to recognize you and clap before you actually speak. I've never really understood that, right? Because hopefully this will not be the case today, but sometimes afterwards you're like, I don't know, I didn't like that, right? And then the ovation afterwards is not as strong. So we'll see how I do. So I've got a brief presentation. I'm going to go through it. I'll go through it rather quickly. I want to leave some time for questions, whatever questions that you might have after the presentation. So the first thing I think is, if you can see these slides, there's one on the left and one on the right. what's happening in Florida today is a tribute to many of the economic forums that have been around in Florida, including yourselves, for a very, very long time. Right? As I go across the country, as I'm sure many of you do, and you're in business circles, inevitably one of the questions that comes up is, "Boy, what are you guys doing in Florida? The growth is unbelievable that you folks have," and it's always followed up by a personal anecdote, like, "My brother-in-law and sister just moved to Florida for this opportunity," or "My carpenter that I've been using for 20 years just moved down to Orlando for the opportunities," or "Gee whiz, I'm hearing a lot of recruitment talk from some of the companies in Florida and by local social circles." So it's not only what folks are reading in the media, it's all of these personal experiences that folks are having in their life. And as you can see by the charts that you have above, Florida is just an economic powerhouse, and will continue, in my view, to be so. And that again, that says something about folks like you and organizations like where you sit at today. So what about the Florida economy, right? The Florida economy is growing. It's growing significantly. As I've always said, even when I was at the other side of the house at NextEra Energy, whatever happens in the Florida economy affects us directly. And if it's a positive development in the Florida economy, in other words, it's more and more people that are moving into the state, that's great for Florida. And guess what? It's pretty okay for us too, right? We're the ones that are serving the electricity needs for the businesses for half of Florida. We're also the ones that are serving the electricity needs for more than half of the population of Florida. We like to say we have 5.8 million customer accounts. Those customer accounts are meters. We serve a lot more people than that. Over half of the population in Florida is served by Florida Power and Light, and we're very happy to be there. One of the questions that I received as we were leading up to this presentation is, what is 35 mules? Let me just, you can raise your hand. Do you know, not literally what 35 mules is. I mean, if I brought in 35 mules, I think we could all say, yeah, that's 35 mules. Does anybody know what 35 mules is? So less than 0.05% of the audience knows about 35 mules. So 35 mules is an innovation hub that was started by Florida Power and Light Company around 2020. There are many innovation hubs in Florida. There are many innovation hubs across the U.S. that get folks together and give those folks an experience where they can grow. They can grow the opportunity. They can grow their idea. We and others provide them not only senior leadership, we provide them a little bit of money. We kind of guide them in the right direction to make sure that they can understand how to raise money for their venture, and allow them to think much broader in terms of bringing a product out to the market. It's been very successful. We've had what we call two cohorts already that have come through the process, and it ranges from about 8 to 10 companies that come in. They'll stay 12 to 18 months, and we will give them the space. We'll give them a little bit of money. We will give them the experience. We will allow them to talk to all of our experts inside of the organization, and hopefully by the time they come out, they've got a product or an idea that they can actually sell in the market. We've got one here, it's called Sustainabase, which is a graduate of the 35 Mules program, a company down in West Palm Beach that actually took their product and is being very successful with it. It is a terrific program. If you've never been to an innovation hub and you have the opportunity to go, it's breathtaking, right? You'll have all of these CEOs, and think of, many of you I'm sure have young children, or what I think of to be as young, right? You have some CEOs of these companies that could be 18, 19 years old. You have some of these CEOs of these companies that could be 72 years old. And they will blow you away with the ideas that they have, and they are trying to make sure that they have an opportunity to get out into the world and sell their product. They are amazing. Now, do they all work? No, of course they don't all work, right? I mean, a lot of things have to line up to make sure that they work, but the ideas are solid ideas. We don't take just any 8 or 10. There are hundreds of applications that are submitted every year to try to get into our 35 Mules program, and we select what we believe are those that have the best chance based on the resources that we can provide them to succeed. It's an amazing, amazing program. Why 35 Mules? Why the name 35 Mules? So Florida Power and Light Company started in the Miami area. It wasn't selling electricity 98 years ago. It was selling ice. The company actually got started by buying what we call ice trailers or ice carts, right? You would move ice from one location to the other to keep things cool. So in that first transaction, we bought 3 things. We bought a bunch of ice trailers. We bought a sponging boat. I have no idea whatever happened to that sponging boat. It would be really nice to have nowadays. And we bought exactly 35 mules to move our trailers around. So I don't know whoever came up with that a couple of years ago. If any of you have ever been in the business of trying to find a name for something new, it's like really, really hard, right? So I'm sure we didn't hire a consultant for that. Somebody just kind of walked in and say, hey, what about this picture on the wall? It has a bunch of mules. And oh, there you go. So that's our 35 Mules program. At Florida Power and Light, I talked about we cover over half of the state, and we have the largest power fleet in the U.S. We have the largest number of customers. We sell the largest amount of power in the country. A lot of that is because the economics in Florida have been powering Florida Power and Light for a very long time. If we go on to into this next slide, the thing that has resonated with Florida Power and Light leadership for a long time, obviously this didn't start out with me 8 months ago, is how can we solve the riddle or the complex problem of being able to give our customers reliable power that is affordable. It's not an easy thing to solve, and if you try to add to that reliable power that is affordable and has less emissions than what you were trying to use just 5 years ago, if you try to roll all of that together, it's a really difficult thing to do. But at FPL, one of the things that we always have at the very front end of the curve when we're looking at opportunities is, what's this going to do to the customer bill? Because there's a lot of things that we can do where we believe it would improve the customer experience, right? There's lots of stuff we could do, and we're doing a lot of those things. But what is the effect? Let's start out with, what is the effect on the customer bill? Because if customers are happy, your regulators are going to be happy. And if your regulators are happy, it's more than likely that your investors, your shareholders are going to be happy, right? If your customers aren't happy and give reasons to the regulators that, hey, maybe those guys at FPL just aren't really doing a good job, and makes those regulators ask questions and push you in a direction that is not necessarily what your view of the world is, it's very likely that the end result will not be good for your customers, for you, or your shareholders. If you keep your customers at the very front end of that curve and they're always in your front end decisions, it makes a difference. So I show this slide as much as possible. It shows we have one of the lowest bills in the nation, roughly 25 to 30% lower on a national average than everyone else. Again, and that's because we provide clean, affordable, and reliable power. Bunch of squiggly lines on here that you won't understand, but all it says is that we are more reliable than anybody else generally in the nation. We have won a reliability award 7 out of the last 8 years on a national basis. Again, let's do the right thing for our customers, and let's make sure that the power is affordable. We live in a growing state. I've covered that part, which is the left, but we also live in a state that has a lot of hurricanes. And it is what defines Florida Power and Light nationally. When I worked at the other side of the company, I would continuously bring CEOs from other utilities around the nation down here so they could see what a Florida Power and Light was doing in terms of emergency preparedness. Because emergency preparedness for us is mostly hurricanes. For others, it means other things. It means ice storms. It means earthquakes. It means fires. You can imagine what it means to other utilities. Other utilities, the California utilities, we all know the California utilities, they're friends of ours. When they were having their fire issues early on, they would come down to Florida Power and Light to understand what we did in hurricanes, right? Why were we able to underground power lines? How were we able to do it so efficiently? What did the metrics mean when you actually undergrounded power lines in a hurricane, and what that could mean to them in fire season? And around the nation, these folks would come, and they still do. By the way, we go out and see them too, right? We go out. We haven't invented all of the best tools in the toolkit. We'll go out and understand what other folks are doing to make sure that it works for us. This says we're reaching an inflection point. So I've gotten a couple of questions when I met some of you before the lunch about renewable energy. Recall that the other side of the business that I ran for 8 years, we did everything on that side of the business, right? So we're not known for doing everything at NextEra Energy Resources. So this is the non-FPL. But at NextEra Energy Resources, we owned 3 power plants. We owned the most wind and the most solar of anybody in the nation. We owned the most battery storage of anybody in the nation. But guess what? We also drilled for oil. We also drilled for natural gas. We also own oil pipelines. We also own gas pipelines. We also own natural plants that burn natural gas. We also own a lot of transmission infrastructure. We also are a trading organization, right? So we trade power and we trade gas, and we're also a retail organization in those places, in some of those places across the United States. So NextEra Energy Resources is, when you think about an all of the above energy company, that's what I ran for 8 years. And so coming over to Florida Power and Light, what we are getting, because we're building a lot of solar at Florida Power and Light right now. And I'm going to tell you why we're building all that solar in a minute. But coming over to Florida Power and Light, we have all of that experience in-house as to how is the solar going to do, how do we have to build it, how can we make it cheaper. And by the way, if we could build it at Florida Power and Light at the same time that we're building it on the other side of the company, we have massive scale. And massive scale in the energy business is needed to keep prices down. If I'm competing with someone that is trying to build, let's say, 10 solar sites a year, and I am building 60 solar sites a year on a combined basis, guess what? I can actually have a pretty darn decent commercial discussion with you as to why you should sell me those panels cheaper. And that is a huge benefit to the customers here in Florida. But why are we building them? I mean, why are we building so much solar? Many of you have probably seen our solar projects throughout Florida. We have 66 solar projects today all across the state. By early next year, we'll have over 100 solar projects in operation. We're building them because they save money for our customers. That's why we're building them, right? It makes sense for our customers to reduce the amount of natural gas that we're burning at Florida Power and Light and increase the amount of energy that we're getting from solar. We saw it over on the other side of the business when I was running that, and now we're seeing it at Florida Power and Light. In the last couple of years, we have had significant fuel savings from our solar panels all across the state. Does that mean we don't like natural gas? No, I love natural gas. Right? Florida Power and Light burns more natural gas than any utility in the nation. Than any utility. That's how much natural gas we buy. But would I rather build solar panels that ultimately save customers money and stop importing gas from Texas and Oklahoma? Yes, I actually would. I'd rather Texas and Oklahoma take their gas somewhere else and we get free energy from the sun here in Florida. We're going to have a lot more solar that we are going to build in Florida, and a lot of it is going to be backed up by battery storage. I get a lot of questions on battery storage. What's a battery storage? How many of you own an electric vehicle? So 1% own an electric vehicle. Battery storage is, if you can imagine, I would not suggest that you do what I'm about to say, right? But if you go inside your electric vehicle and you take one of the batteries and rip it open, take a knife, take it down the side, and figure out and look at what's inside, it looks like a bunch of brand X AA batteries. They don't exactly look like AA batteries, but you'll get the hint if you ever do it. I suggest you don't, but you'll get the hint, right? So what do we do for battery storage on a large scale? We have these 18-wheeler semi-trucks that you see down the road. Imagine one of those things filled with AA batteries. Sophisticated AA batteries, but AA batteries nonetheless. That's what battery storage is. And so when the sun starts going down at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, guess what's going to take you through the next 4 hours of the peak of the electricity use? That battery storage. It is an absolute game changer. Storage in the electricity sector is not new, right? We've been using it for a long time. We've been using hydro out west as sort of storage, right? So you run it down, you run the water through the turbines when you need it, right, during the end of the day. That's your battery storage. And then when the solar comes out or your gas plant is running, you take that water and you pump it back up to the front, to the top, and then when you need it, you run it back down. And solar storage isn't new, right? How many of you have the landscape lights that you just put in the yard, and when the sun goes down, they pop up? All right? So the solar storage has been around a long time. Now the problem is that if you take a bunch of those lights and you put them on your roof, that's it's not really economical. But the technology is there, and we're taking huge advantage of it. I think I forgot to turn the slide before, so apologize. So what are the challenges for us in Florida? I think I've mentioned all of these. Growth is a big challenge in Florida. For those of you that have not been to South Florida, in particular Miami, in the last couple of years, you will be amazed about what's going on in Miami. First, you'll probably be amazed by the traffic. But second, you will be amazed by the cranes and the buildings that are going up in Miami. For those of you that haven't been to Orlando recently, how many of you have been to Orlando recently? How many of you are familiar with 417, right? Okay, well, 417 did not exist that long ago, right? And it is like packed all of the time. Tremendous road construction, tremendous amount of building everywhere. In the Jacksonville area, in the Tampa area, in the Southwest Florida area, and from the Jupiter area in Southeast Florida all the way down to Miami. It is just a tremendous amount of growth. All of that growth I just mentioned is in our area. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge to keep up. Hurricanes are a real challenge. They're not, they're getting, and I'm not going to debate why, it's just a fact. They're getting bigger and they're getting stronger, right? It should no longer surprise us that we see a hurricane close to one of our coasts and the weather folks are telling us it's going to be a Category 1, and within 12 hours it's a Category 3, and then it's a Category 4. Look what just happened with Hurricane Idalia, right, last month. It was a Category 1. In less than 24 hours it got to be a Category 4, just buzzing up the west coast of Florida and the Gulf Stream, and then it hit as a Category 3 inside of the state. Hurricanes are stronger, they're larger, and they affect our system. Those are the challenges. And by the way, with Hurricane Idalia, we had less than 0.05 0.03% of our solar panels that were affected. 0.03, which was roughly the same percentage that we had last year when those hurricanes hit Southwest Florida. These panels are terrific. Once the storm passes, they're generating power. They generate power right up to the time that the storm comes and the clouds come. They're pretty terrific. We've had a huge transformation in Florida over the last 20 years. We took down a lot of our old natural gas plants. I explained this very easily, and for some of you in the crowd, this is going to make sense. For others of you, you're going to turn to your neighbor and ask, what in the hell is he talking about, right? So how many of you remember the 1974 Cadillac Eldorados? Okay. Boy, less than half. Now I really feel old, okay? So the gas mileage on those was like 10 miles a gallon, right? What we have done in Florida over the last 20 years is essentially gotten rid of all of our 1974 Cadillac Eldorados and replaced them with little bitty Toyota Corollas. They both burn on gas. They both burn gasoline, but one is 10 miles a gallon and the other one's 36 miles a gallon. And so all of the old natural gas plants in Florida, we tore down. And we put up brand new natural gas burning gas plants in Florida. And it was like going from the Cadillac Eldorado to the Toyota Corolla. And in that span, we have saved customers $15 billion of fuel just by doing that. Right? So while others were sitting around and we were looking at the growth in Florida, and we were, again, first focused on our customer bill, we said we better get all these Cadillac Eldorados off the road, right? And we're still burning, again, I told you, we're burning more natural gas than anybody in the nation, and we are the most efficient in the nation. And you will be able to see that, if I remember my slides correctly. On this next slide, you'll see this video of us tearing down one of our old natural gas plants. Now that I'm sitting here looking at that, we probably on the right should have had a video of one of those time-lapse ones of a new gas plant going up at the same time. But if any of you have seen our new gas plants, they're beautiful. They're lower, they're shiny, and they burn less natural gas and less O&M. Where are we going in the future? If you can see the charts that I have here on the left, in the 1980s, we burnt more fuel oil than anybody in the nation, right here at Florida Power and Light, right? And back then, I was not around. Right, we were smart enough to say, burning fuel oil when that oil is coming from nations that hate us is probably not a great idea. So what did we do? We built those natural gas plants that you just saw me tear down. But we didn't stop there. We tore those down, and now we have the efficient plant. You can see where we're going in the future. Natural gas is still going to be significant for us in Florida, but so will solar energy. This is just a chart with a bunch more squiggly lines saying that we are very, very efficient. We're running a bunch of Toyota Corollas, in other words. There's a lot of other stuff that has happened. I am going to flip through here. It's going to be very difficult for me to see those numbers that come up. But if you will excuse me for just 1 second, I'm going to go over here. I'll speak loudly so I can explain some of these slides to you. And take the microphone with me. Why didn't I think of that before? All right, that works. So I said, that we were changing, and how are we changing to meet the growth of Florida? So if you look at the numbers here on the left, those are the numbers from 2004, 2005. As I flip the slides, they'll be the numbers for 2023. So in 2004 and 2005, we had 13% of our lines. So all of those overhead lines that you see that were what we call hardened. What does hardened mean? Imagine, if you will, actually we can imagine it right here. You see these two pillars right here? Just assume that those are two power poles in the ground, right? When we harden a line, we put a pillar right in the middle there.
So now you've got a much stronger set of lines for both wind, rain, and anything else that might come in. So that's what I talk about hardened. So we had 13% of our lines hardened in 2004, 2005. We're up to 77% now. And it makes a huge difference. A huge difference. Hurricane Ian last year in Southwest Florida. And many of you saw the devastation, and many of you unfortunately may have been in that devastation. We did not have one transmission pole down. Not one pole came down, right? So we've invested a lot of money to make sure, but it makes a difference, right? We got folks up and running in that storm much quicker than we would have been able to do so. Concrete or steel transmission structures, 58% in 04, 05, that's up to 94% today. That'll be up to 100% by the end of this decade. Miles of vegetation trimmed on average annually, 8,000 miles. That's up to 17,000 miles. So we love Florida, right? We love Florida. Guess who else loves Florida? The rain loves Florida, right? And guess what trees and shrubs love? The rain and the sun. The stuff doesn't stop growing here. We have to trim more. We're trimming twice as much as we were doing before so it doesn't come into our power lines. Intelligent devices installed 257 to 208,000 now. Let me tell you what intelligent devices are. So if you see, since I've given you the visual of the two pillars being electric poles, imagine the wires, the electric wires going up on those poles. We now have what we call automatic feeder switches. Well, that was easy before. Now, automatic feeder switches. What do the automatic feeder switches do? Imagine the line is right there, and you have a tree on this side, and the tree branch falls on the line. Before, if that would happen, the breaker would open, and by the breaker opening, that just means no more power will flow through that line. We would have to roll out our trucks to all of those customers to figure out what the problem was, right? It could be hundreds or thousands of customers, right? But now power isn't flowing on that line, so we got to roll out trucks and we got to go figure it out. And by the way, we don't know that it was here. We have to patrol this entire area to figure out where the problem is before we could reset it. Now we put a switch on these lines. So a branch fall, breaker opens, so power stops flowing. After a few seconds, it closes again. Because guess what happens most of the time? It wasn't a tree that fell on the line, it was a branch. So the branch hit it, breaker open, no power, branch fell down, breaker closed, everybody has power. We didn't have to roll a truck. You didn't have to, well, unfortunately, you had to probably do the oven or something, right? The clock on the oven, which is, I can't imagine. In today's, see, this is I got to get it. So how come we have not figured that out? Seriously, how can we not, right, have figured that out? I mean, it was okay in the 80s, you know, the VCR and the VHS or whatever, but my gosh, we have these little devices that can put people on the moon, and we cannot figure out that, you know, to build an oven, to manufacture an oven, that doesn't happen. Anyway, so you can see that 208,000 switches, people get their power back on earlier, and we spend less money, and we keep our costs down. That's a big part of the automated switches. Well, this clicker was working great before. Okay. Remember, I briefly spoke about power lines and getting them underground before. That is huge for us. We have an entire program to be able to do that throughout the state of Florida. I don't know if any of you that live in an FPL territory have actually seen that going on. These are really what I call community lines. These are not the big lines. So in your community, those community lines are the weakest link, right? They're the smallest pole, they're the smallest wire. They're also the ones where you were not supposed to plant that avocado tree under that line, but you planted that avocado tree, didn't you, right? And now that avocado tree branch is hitting the line, and your neighbor is losing power. Not you maybe, but your neighbor is. So the more we can get those community lines underground, the better. We've got a giant program to be able to do that. Is it costly to do that? Yes, it is costly to do that. So we have to be judicious.
right? And what we can bury underground. But I can tell you that after a hurricane, having these community lines underground, or in the afternoon thunderstorms that we get here in Florida, having all of that underground is huge. And now, when somebody plants the avocado tree, you don't also have to worry about that branch hitting those wires every other day. It is a huge investment that we are making in Florida, but we are making it only because ultimately it saves customers money. We are not doing it, we would not do it if it did not save customers money. So we're really happy with that program. So we're back to solar. Look, this says that you may have seen some of our plants on I-10. I would imagine a lot of you have seen our plants. Maybe you don't know that there are plants. They're saving our customers a lot of money. We're putting them in places that are not close to where people are at this point, which is really helpful. I could go around this room and I could ask a question. I could probably get 98% of you to agree with me, right? I could say, look, I have a new power source. It's pretty much zero cost. It doesn't have any emissions. It'll stay on during a hurricane. What do you guys think? I could probably get 98% of the room to agree with me, right? But then I'd have to say, great. It's just that I need the transmission line to go through your house. And now I've got nobody agreeing with me. And that's a real issue today in building both generation assets and transmission assets. So it's important for us to continue to find places to be able to build these assets that are not necessarily that close to people. And you can do that with solar very, very easily. You don't have to, for example, be right next to a gas pipeline. All right, we have 3 gas pipelines that come into Florida. If you want to build a new natural gas plant, you got to be fairly close to one of those natural gas pipelines, or it's going to be really costly. So those are the 2 solar centers. I've talked about those. Something else that we're doing, which is kind of exciting, is hydrogen. So many of you have probably heard about hydrogen. I know all of you have heard about H2O, right? Everybody knows H2O is, right? Does everybody understand what the H is in H2O, right? That's hydrogen. So you can create what we call green hydrogen. So we have all of these solar plants. Oh, here we have a video. I forgot we had the video. We have all of these solar plants. You can have the solar plants actually provide power to an electrolyzer. All an electrolyzer does is separate the H, right, from the H2O. So you have hydrogen. You're now going to be able to use that hydrogen to run your fossil plants, your natural gas plants. It's really exciting. We are experimenting with it now. We're going to have our first pilot done by the end of the year. We're going to take this pilot. We're going to experiment a little bit more with the pilot. But think about that, right? You're splitting the H2O. You're getting the hydrogen, and instead of burning natural gas, you can just burn the hydrogen through the turbines. While we love natural gas, and I've said that about 10 times, I will continue to love natural gas, and we're going to continue to be the largest user of natural gas in the nation. It's also important to remember we live in a state that has 3 natural gas pipelines that come in it. We need those 3 gas pipelines all of the time. And so one of the risks when you're running Florida Power and Light Company is what happens in a hurricane or another natural disaster when you don't have one of those natural gas pipelines. So a lot of what you're seeing with solar, potentially with hydrogen and other uses, is to determine whether we can actually diversify away from all that natural gas. We're also, so think about the customers. What are the other things the customers want? The 3 folks in this room that own electric vehicles will be glad to know that we are also providing home charging. It's going to be a must-do as we move through the revolution. I don't I don't I know there are some that believe that the electric vehicle revolution is sort of like the talk of the day and not something that is going to have a lot of legs long term. I got to tell you, I spent a lot of time with battery technology, so I have a view as to where the cost is going with battery technology. There is a reason, and it's not just some of the federal incentives. There is a reason why all of the car manufacturers in the world are moving to battery EVs very quickly. Right? They have seen the handwriting on the wall, and that handwriting on the wall is in the next decade, so in the 2030s, it will be fairly difficult for you to to make an economic decision on a car that is not an electric car. It's going to be difficult, right? We're not seeing it now. We're not going to see it for the rest of this decade. You're going to see a bunch of electric cars and so on. But as it rolls on, and you're sitting here in the 2035, 36, 37, you may very well be sitting at the lot and saying, like you're sitting here today at the lot, saying, do I really want to pay a 10% premium for the electric car? You're going to be saying, do I really want to pay a 10% premium for a gasoline car, right? And that's going to be the economic revolution that's really going to move this. There's our 35 mules. I've talked about our 35 mules. That's one of them. So there was only 34 others that did not get in the picture. And then I will open it up for any questions that you might have.
Can you give me an idea of what your breakdown is, solar, nat gas, sources of energy, what percentage comes from each of those sources? And then I have another question about EVs.
Okay, so I've got a slide here. I flipped through it quickly. Andrew, we do have a slide, don't we? Yeah. Did I already skip it? No. I love this slide because you got to click through it 8 times. Everybody knows my slides except me. That's perfect. So, so here's the answer to your question, right? So in 2001, this is where we were on the pie chart. You can see where we are in 2022. You can see how much natural gas we have, continue to have, and will continue to have. You can see the nuclear, and you can see the solar today. So what's going to happen, if you can just imagine that 2022 slide, the 71%, that blue is going to get smaller. The green, which is the solar, is going to get bigger, and the nuclear will remain the same.
So where do you think the green will be in a decade?
By 2033, I think the green will be 25%.
Wow. It's a big number.
Yeah.
So you were talking about hydrogen, and I was thinking about the Inflation Reduction Act. There's hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in technology that's not on the ground. How long before it will make a meaningful contribution to sourcing power?
So I'll answer that in 2 phases. So one, at Florida Power and Light, the Inflation Reduction Act is making a huge difference because when I say that solar is economical and we save money for our customers, that's because of the Inflation Reduction Act, right? That is because of the production tax credits of building solar for our customers. The Inflation Reduction Act also has a piece on hydrogen, right? Hydrogen credits. We will use those hydrogen credits in our very small project that we have. It's really a pilot project. On the other side of the business that I used to run at NextEra Energy, the Inflation Reduction Act is also making a big difference, both on the wind and the solar side, and it's starting to make a difference in hydrogen. What you have to understand about hydrogen today is there's a lot of hydrogen that's being made by just burning fossil fuels, by burning natural gas, and so when natural gas prices are low, it's the output, if you will, is pretty cheap. To actually avail yourself of the credits from the Inflation Reduction Act,
and to make it economical and commercial, you're likely going to need natural gas prices to go up, right? Or you're going to have people that are willing to pay a premium for hydrogen products, to have either a hydrogen product that is created from renewables, which is called green hydrogen, or a hydrogen product that is created from fossil products, but where the emissions is then stored underground, which is called blue hydrogen. So hydrogen has been, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, very slow to get off the ground. And it's been slow to get off the ground because although natural gas prices rose last year, as many of you know, they're kind of back to where they were historical levels. And there's a question as to whether they're going to rise significantly enough to make a lot of the hydrogen products economical.
One provocative question before you go. EVs, is it the ethanol of our generation where it takes more energy to produce it than it saves?
So, did everybody hear the question, right? Is it the ethanol of our generation? I don't know that I could do a fair job of answering that question because I don't understand the economics of ethanol, right? If I knew more about the economics of ethanol, I could do a compare and contrast of the two. What I have spent a lot of time on, really because of my old job, is understanding battery technology. Because why? Battery technology is critical to renewables. Has not been that critical to renewables in the past because renewables are just such a small part of the grid that it really didn't matter that the wind blew sometimes and the solar only worked during, when the sun was out. It wasn't that critical. You could put these renewables up on the grid almost anywhere. It didn't really affect it. As renewables get more and more concentrated, it is important that battery technology and battery storage is a big piece of it. So I spent a lot of time understanding where's battery prices going, right? What's going on with all of the source materials for batteries and so on. And what I've come to understand, and again, I'm not the only one that has this view, and I talked about the car manufacturers, is battery technology is going to get very cheap. Very, very cheap. And once it does, it's no longer going to be economical to buy gasoline-powered cars. Now, that prediction that I just gave you, I first saw that prediction maybe 6 years ago, that would be the case by the end of this decade. We at NextEra Energy did not believe that would be the case by the end of this decade, right? And for a lot of reasons that I won't go into. I am now starting to be convinced that actually is the case mid to late next decade. And when that happens, again, when you go to the car lot today, you pay a 10 or 20% premium for an electric car. And that might make sense for you in your own situation, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of people. You're going to be in the opposite situation. And then you're going to have to decide, do I really want a gas-powered car? Because by that time, the range anxiety will have gone away. We will have electric cars that could go 800 miles between charges, not 350 to 450. Yes.
Armando, thank you for being here today. I ask you this question as a shareholder of NextEra Energy and as a shareholder of NextEra Energy Partners. You seemingly had a very innocuous statement from NextEra Energy Partners last week that because of interest rates going up, capital cost expenditures were going up, and the rate of dividend growth for Next Energy Partners was going to go down. The street's reaction has punished Next Energy Partners by 55% on the downside, and now is affecting NextEra Energy. How do you roll out a basic economic message without the street reacting the way it did, which seemingly is just a basic interest rates going up, dividend increases are going to go down, without staring at what seemingly is a 55% reduction in Next Energy Era Partners stock?
Right. So does everybody understand the question? Right. So it requires, I'm going to take just a couple minutes here. It requires me to talk about the economy in general, right? Which I actually spend a lot of time on, just because I like to understand what's going on in the economy and all the sectors of the economy. And I can tell you that the economy is on edge right now, right? And a lot of us don't see it every day, right? I just read an article this morning. We have the largest amount of Chapter 11 bankruptcies in the nation, mostly by small businesses, in the last year that we've had in a number of years, right? And a lot of us don't see that. Some of you may see that. So you've got a lot of small businesses that had fairly decent loans that at 3%, 4%, that are now going back to their community banks and are saying, I need another inventory loan, I'm expanding, I'm doing this, and they're like, and the bank is like, well, okay, but the rate is now 9%, or the rate is 10%. There is a underlying part of the economy that is not doing very well at all. The S&P 500, it's up for this year, barely. Do you know why it's up? Right, it's up because of 7 stocks. Not because of the other 493 stocks, right? So we don't focus on that. There's not enough detail that's provided to us. What has actually happened during the last 18 months? So these increases in Fed rates, right, which some of us see, some of us read about, are absolutely significantly affecting business. I know it's affecting many of you. It's affecting everyone in our industry. And so for a while, when rates are going up, and you are a capital-intensive business like Florida Power & Light or like NextEra Energy, and I'm going to leave Florida Power & Light off of this because it's not as big of an effect actually on Florida Power & Light. So these comments are really related to your comments about NextEra Energy Partners and NextEra Energy Inc. Those are capital-intensive entities. If you have to, at NextEra Energy, we're going to invest over $20 billion of capital this year. We have to go find that capital. That capital consists both of equity and debt, and the cost of that is up significantly in the last 18 months. So at NextEra Energy Partners, we decided that we were going to purchase less assets and therefore decrease the dividend growth. And we said we were doing that because the cost of capital had gotten so high in the industry that it didn't make sense for us to keep buying assets, financing those assets to grow at the rate that we were growing at. By the way, that message that we gave a couple of days ago is no different than the message that many companies in the U.S. are giving right now. Capital costs and other costs are up significantly, and we've got to figure out whether we make the decision to continue to invest. What we also said, so we slowed a subsidiary down. What we also said is, even with that increased cost of capital at the big company, at NextEra Energy, we can continue to meet the guidance, the expectations that we have provided you and other investors. How did the street, broadly defined, how did the street respond to that? They didn't like it at all. They were surprised by it. And they took our stock down, and we, NextEra Energy, unfortunately, took the rest of the industry down. Because investors, while they should have known that if you're in a capital-intensive industry, you've got to borrow a lot of money and everyone's cost of capital is up, right? We're awoken by the fact that interest rates are up, cost of capital is up, and we have to go find a lot of money, we and others. So utilities across the board, including NextEra Energy, are one of the largest capital players in the entire United States, right? If you go state by state, you will see that it's the utility that is generally top 2, top 3 capital provider in the state. So that's what happened. I can tell you the fundamental business on both sides is still very strong and is still very good, but the market is kind of scratching their head saying, I'm not sure what to do with this cost of capital increase and what it means. So it's going to take some time, in my view, for the street and analysts and investors to understand that the fundamental businesses are still good, and this cost of capital thing is hopefully temporary.
Thank you.
Last question.
Great. Thanks, Armando. I'm Dave Micah. Spent my adult life in the energy industry and also pretty much a Floridian. My family got here just after I was born. And what I watched is Florida Power and Light be a driving force to make my state great. Just incredible economic development. And I want to thank you for an energy presentation. Is one of the best I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you.
Your emphasis was perfect in my mind in the right places about reliability and about affordability. And most people don't understand the balance associated with those kind of things. And I've watched the investments that your company has made. The legacy of leadership that preceded you in the company is pretty remarkable. And they've made moves that have been very, very strategic for their shareholders and their ratepayers. And to do both of those things at one time is very, very difficult. I've moved in that sector now where my rate paying stuff is much more sensitive to me than probably ever before as a retiree. You're doing great things. I hope that you can continue them on. I can't find any areas that I really disagree with. I do have a question or two.
Okay, question.
Your emphasis on underground utilities is perfect, associated with not arguing about where it's coming from, just knowing that they seem to be getting more severe and where we live. Therefore, it makes some sense. Even though they're costly, when you do full cost accounting on some of that things with trimming and cleanup and everything else that goes on, it makes sense to go underground, which leads me to my first question. It's sort of a territorial question.
Go ahead.
That's associated with our municipal utilities.
Mm-hmm.
We have one here. Our legislature felt like it was so important because one was so misguided that they decided to have the governor appoint a body to govern the one in the home of my alma mater, not yours.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a little rocky. I want to know what you think about the future of municipal electricity. And the one area that you didn't talk much about is your component associated with nuclear and where you see that in 15 years as well. So
all right, so I will do that very quickly.
You answer that.
So I think munis and co-ops are here to stay. Each one of them have issues and opportunities that are unique to them. I will say that the pressures that we are seeing on cost of capital also is reflective on them, maybe not as much. So I think everybody that's in this business, whether you're investor owned or muni or co-op, will continue to have challenges. But I think they're here to stay. They serve a purpose. They're loved in the community, and I just don't see them going anywhere. And the second question on nuclear, we're in the process of extending our nuclear licenses at Florida Power and Light for both of our plants an additional 20 years. So operating those through, trying to remember, the 2050s and 2060s. It's cheap, it's reliable, it's terrific power, and by the way, they're sited in the right place. It'd be impossible for us to cite anything else where they're at. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Armando Pimentel, President and CEO of Florida Power and Light Company, speaking before the Economic Club of Florida on October 5th, 2023 in Tallahassee, Florida. For more information on Florida Power and Light, visit fpl.com. The Economic Club of Florida promotes interest and enlightenment on important economic, political, and social issues of the day. To learn more, including how to become a member, visit our website at economic-club.com. This program was recorded at the Champions Club at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida.